Guys, we are here at downtown Toronto at the Mars District, and we will be talking to none other than the CEO, Mr. David of GrassLand. We look forward to a wonderful interview and a very interesting time. This video is sponsored by Meta Marketing International, as well as affiliated with MEXC Exchange. Guys, thank you for your time, and let's go. Welcome back, and thank you for coming back. We are here today with a special guest, Mr. David. David is the founder of GrassLand, and he's also had a couple of other inventions prior to this as well that we might touch on as well, just for a little bit of history. David, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, we met at a Bitcoin Bay conference meetup. Just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Now we ended up chatting, and I was just completely thrilled with your project, impressed, and also had a lot of questions, if you remember correctly. Now, just to give us a little bit of history, before we get into your project, what actually got you into cryptocurrency?
So this would have been about a decade ago. Actually, a little bit more than that. I was trying to figure out a way to create like a digital currency using something very similar to Git, which is just a version control system that you'd use with software, and you hash things at each step of the way. I figured you'd be able to create a ledger from that. I have an email correspondence between me and a friend about this. And then I remember, at one point emailing him and just saying, "Oh, it looks like somebody already made it. It's called Bitcoin." So this would have been...
What year was this?
Oh, this would have been 2010 going into 2011, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the very beginnings almost, right?
Yeah.
And what happened from then on? Like what was your first entry into Bitcoin? Because that was really the only thing going on.
Like I knew, I was following it. I knew what was going on. I was really excited. It was very interesting, but I wanted to just build something, do something with it. And I didn't know, it was like a few years, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so then I started doing Bitcoin meetups. This is in Ottawa, Canada. And then, I have some friends, from friends and then friends of friends, they joined up, and then we started, we got this idea we were going to make a Bitcoin ATM.
Okay.
Right. And so one of the world's first Bitcoin ATMs, I think just came out this was 2013. And one of the world's first Bitcoin ATMs came out that summer. This
Where,
would have been
in the States?
Yeah, it was in the States. I remember I was first announced at this conference in San Jose.
Okay.
I think it was called RoboCoin, but I don't know if they were the first. I think there was one just before them.
Okay.
And so then we started working on one there in Ottawa. This is late 2013. Mm-hmm. And so, so it was a friend, it was a friend, Hasib Awan, it was a guy, Mo Adam, it was Vignesh Sundaresan, you guys know him as Metakovan. Yeah. And it was so it was a bunch of us just working on that. And it was also, I gotta mention another guy who was Sir Safe. I just can't forget his name. I just can't forget to mention him as well.
Of course.
And so, it was very exciting. It was very new. It was interesting. It was like, okay, we were taking something that was sort of intangible, and you're giving it, tangibility. It's like an ATM, right?
Yes.
Of course, you would
something physical,
something
exactly.
physical, and then. It was very exciting. We got some press about that, notoriety about that, and we actually sold our first ATM to Anthony Diorio, who from at the Bitcoin meetups here in Toronto.
Yes,
and that was at the same time that he was starting to announce Ethereum.
Right. And so that was 2014?
That was the beginning of 2014, right. December 2013, January 2014. And I remember him, putting together that team. And I was just talking about this today, how I remember him coming to Ottawa, sitting at our ATM, and then he started telling us he was very excited about this new concept that he had, this new idea from this kid in his meetup, and it was about smart contracts.
Right.
And so
that kid was Vitalik.
Yeah,
right?
that kid was Vitalik. So it was very interesting to see all these connections and how things have gone from there.
Things were building then.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's amazing. So you definitely got your first touch in Bitcoin then. But was it blockchain that grabbed your attention more than the currency aspect of it after that?
Sorry, I should mention the guy's name was Sajid. That was the other member of our team. I just didn't want to forget him.
No,
the blockchain aspect of it, that was very interesting. Of course, it was the fact that, it was touching so many different things. It was touching economics and politics, and it was just a very, very sort of exciting new concept, new way of doing things. And so at that time, though, I started working on I love mathematics and programming, and I wanted to solve I started working on different types of problems, different types of mathematical problems and AI problems, and that sort of led me into sort of what we're working on now.
Right.
And so what happened is there was a couple of years after this, a professor at the University of Montreal, Professor Yeshua Bengio, he heard of what I was doing in Ottawa with some new types of AI that I'd been building. Mm-hmm. And he said that, he invited me down, asked me to come and see what they were working on there. And he told me that...
That must have been exciting for you, right?
Yeah, it was very exciting because he's probably, I'd say he's one of the godfathers of AI.
Wow.
So there's Jeffrey Hinton here in Toronto.
Yes. And
Yeshua Bengio in Montreal. And of course, from that school there, you get Yan LeCun, who heads Facebook's AI lab.
Okay.
And of course, that's where sort of Facebook's AI lab is in Montreal. Some of the research is being done there. And so he invited me down. He asked me if I could help them solve this problem that they were facing. He said everybody's facing this problem, and it's sort of the next frontier of AI, where the problem is, how do you give AI an intuitive understanding of the real world? So give this example, you can toss a ball to a child, and that child will look at the ball, flying through the air and intuitively calculate its position.
Secondhand, like nature.
Yeah.
Second nature.
Yeah,
of course.
And position themselves to where the ball is going to be and catch it, right? And you don't have to teach that child calculus, even though it's doing calculus. And he said, right now, we can create AI, that can generate art, surpassing even human artists, right? Yeah. So you've got, DALL-E, and you've got Stable Diffusion, and you've got Midjourney, right? And of course, we also have AIs now that can, generate, text, that is almost as close as as human as to being human as we know.
Very, very impressive as well. What's going on?
As well as you've got things like AIs that can generate music, and they're doing this intuitively. We're not teaching them music classes. We're not teaching them art, putting them in art classes. We're just showing them examples. And he's like, how can we give AI an intuitive understanding of the real world by its own experiences?
Right.
And so that's kind of led me on this journey.
Wow. And what year did you get started with the project that you're currently...
So this would have been
your main event.
April 13th, 2018.
2018. So 2018. So this is when kind of like the bear crypto market is kind of going on, and everybody's losing faith in the market, and everybody starts to down it and talk bad about it. This is when you go ahead and start building. Yeah. Best time to do it, right? Yeah. Amazing. And what was that like? What was that first entry into your own project? Like what gave you the biggest motivation?
Let me see now. So at first I just went home and I started working on the math because I knew it was a math problem. And that was very interesting for me. I think it was more, I could see that it would change society quite a bit. Because for the first time ever, if I could do, from what the math was telling me, what the game theory was telling me, those calculations were showing, was that if you did it in this particular way, you'd have a trustless and tamper-resistant version of history, right? that wasn't, that you could remove as much bias as you wanted from it, right? And so that's for the first time ever, you'd be able to have this sort of historical record of everything that's going on where, you couldn't really get away with doing anything bad.
Right.
Right. And
no, he said, she said. It kind of kicks that out of the table, right?
Yeah.
It just keeps the honest truth in there, basically.
Exactly.
Wow.
In a way that, it would be computationally intractable to fake.
Right.
And so you could measure that. You could measure how real something, how honest and how, verifiable something was that happened in the real world. That was very, very interesting to me.
Okay. So that was kind of one of your inspirations to get to on the human side to kind of solve that issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was very, very, I think, like just in terms of like the implications, what that would do. It's hard to say like all the implications because there's so many knock-on effects, but I think it was just a very, very important thing to have, especially, as we're facing now. Of course, we've always faced things like with fake news or propaganda. These are things that have, always been throughout history.
Yes. And they affect history as well.
Yeah, and they affect history as well. But here you would have a way that was decentralized and a record that could last, as long as humanity did.
Right. Now, once you did start, if you can tell me and tell the folks at home what you had to do in order to get this project in the mathematical sense. Yeah. So this blew me away. So please let them know.
Yeah. So, I'd looked at things that other people had done before. I'd looked at quite a few different AI projects with what they call multi-object, multi-camera tracking, things like that. I knew I needed to be able to create a model of the real world, and I knew I needed to be able to make it in a way that wasn't intrusive. Because if you had to stick like RFID tags on everything or just using special things, that wouldn't really work. And I needed a way so that anybody could get involved, right? Because the problem was, it was a density problem. You needed to be able to capture, as many things as possible. And in so doing, that necessitates being able to involve as many people as possible, right? Because you need to capture the whole world, right? Or as much as you wouldn't want to place any restrictions. You want to limit the amount of hurdles there would be, right? It's just the same concept that we have always understood with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general, where you wanted to make it permissionless, right? So anybody can get involved. And I knew that was an important thing, because what the problem was stated to me was that this AI, this intelligence needed to have an independent experience of the real world. That was the most important thing. And so to do that, if you just logically think about that, you're like, okay, well, if it has to have an independent experience of the real world, it has to be able to do it on its own without, human bias. And it has to be able to have a model of the real world that was trustless, essentially. Yes. So it's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? It would have to be, in a sense, that it wouldn't be fake, and it would know that it was observing the real world. Yes, permissionless as well. Exactly. So the thing is that I realize that we as humans take for granted is the fact that we perceive the world through one frame of reference at a time. We have two eyes and we have one brain. All right. And so now imagine you look at this table here. Right, you and I were looking at it from one perspective, your perspective, and I'm looking at it from my perspective, right? We can only see this table from one side, but imagine if, we could take one of our eyes, and pull out the optical nerve still connected, and we could see this table from both sides at the same time, right? We'd have this sort of perspective on this table where we'd be able to see, everything that's going, nothing would surprise us in that sense, right? So every angle is covered. From every angle, right? But then, of course, because of the limits of our brain, even if we could adapt to that, everything else in the room would be blurry. Everything else around us would be, we can only focus on. Exactly. Right. But imagine if you had a brain that could handle, signals from maybe 3 or 4 eyes at the same time, right? You could see everything that was coming from around the corner. You could, and you could stretch it as far as you wanted, right? You'd have this perspective on things where you'd have this complete awareness of the environment, of everything that's going on, and you'd understand how all these objects, everything was related to one another, right? But now imagine that you could take that even further. Imagine if you had a brain, this intelligence that could handle signals from an infinite number of eyes. And so, if you remember, everybody remembers from, math class, you have this sort of geometry, the Cartesian plane, where you have an X and a Y coordinate, right?
Yes.
And then in the center of that, you have an origin. And so what I did is I created a new type of mathematics where you could have an infinite number of these origins, and you could transform this sort of set of these origins where you could have as many as you wanted, and they could stretch as far as you wanted. But the concept underlying it would still be the same sort of intelligence that would be within all of these different coordinates at the same time.
Yes.
So it would be in multiple places at once.
That's
right?
wild. Now, just for one moment there, and let me just clarify for the people at home. You just said that very casually. He created a new set of math, and that is just in order. And seeing how this works, just wait till we get there. Please continue. Yes.
Yeah. So I realized that was one of the problems they were facing. So I was like, I knew that, if they had solved that, like if they had realized it was a mathematics problem and done that, then the world would be different by now. So I knew that they must not have solved that. And so I showed it to a friend of mine, a friend Mo, who'd with the Bitcoin ATMs there. And he's like, why would you give this to Facebook? Why would you just give this to them, right? You just built this yourself. Like, why don't you take it further? And I was like, well, there's a lot of work. I knew there was a lot of work.
So you were at a crossroads at that
point. Exactly.
Right.
And I was like, we needed funding for this project that I was working on. And he's like, no, build this. This is like whatever you were working on before. This is much more interesting. And I said, okay. And I was like, well, how are we going to raise money? He's like, you'll figure it out. And so, we figured it out, right? That was the journey, and that's what started it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, so that was the starting and the motivation. It's just you. You were the only you when first started. Did you have any help? Did you go somewhere for consultations, or was anybody else kind of like maybe like somebody to bounce ideas off? Or?
Mainly it was Mo.
Okay.
Mo he still runs BitAccess, actually, with the Bitcoin ATMs there. And I was just getting feedback from him, bouncing sort of ideas off him. There were a few other people. So I contacted this professor at Duke University.
Okay.
Their project, they held the benchmark for multi-object, multi-camera tracking, because I knew I was sort of building off of that sort of system. And he loved this concept. So I got some feedback from them, but it wasn't really that much because I knew that they weren't mathematicians, and they weren't, and I knew I needed to sort of start from first principles, right? Because you're building something that was sort of completely different than anything that had come before, and that was necessitated by the type of problem, right? So, a lot of the things that it just came from was just like what I do is I read, a lot of math books. I do math, solve problems, and then eventually the solution comes to me in the middle of the night. So I'll be sleeping, and like maybe half an hour before like I'm fully awake, it's like in my head, and it's like, this is how you solve this problem.
Wow. So yeah, the mind works in mysterious ways sometimes. So if we can now let the folks at home know, what specific issue is GrassLand solving?
Yeah. So the main thing is giving machines, AI, a complete awareness of the real world, so they understand it, so that they can interact with it. I know if you think about like what that means, right? Not just for robotics. So, for instance, self-driving cars, where you have an AI that be like, so think about it from from a human problem set, right? Where, you're driving, you can only see what's in front of you. You can't see what's going on behind this building or around this car or down the road, right? You don't have this complete awareness where okay, there's a kid riding his bike, just a couple blocks this way, and he's gonna intersect with you, right? Right. But if you knew exactly what that kid's route was, because you had this complete awareness, that kid is going to intersect with you, because that kid every day at 3:30, they always go along this route. And how fast they're going to go, right? You could predict this out into the future. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you could see this, you could do this with everyone in every car, right?
Wow.
And so now you can create all these, think about it like with, we all know this is how machines beat people in chess or Go, right? Wiki, right?
Yes.
Where what they do is they look at the state of the chessboard now, and then they extrapolate out into all the future possibilities.
Right.
Now, what GrassLand does is it gives machines the ability to do that in the real world, because it gives them a digital twin of the real world. Right?
Okay, yes.
And so you can, because now they have the same model of the real world, this digital twin, that they can look at in the same way that you would look at, say, a chessboard.
Yes.
But it's just, of course, a little more complicated. But, and then they can extrapolate out from this history. And of course they have this, remember when I was talking about how, you could see things from all perspectives at once if you had this type of brain. But imagine now you had a perfect memory. And this memory, every event that you'd seen, everything that's ever happened to you was stored perfectly in your memory in like a blockchain, a sequence of events. And you could go back in time and you could look at it. And so your perspective of the world, you wouldn't just be looking at everything from all perspectives at once and being in the sense that nothing would surprise you.
Yes.
You'd be able to see it from all perspectives at once, all the way back through time.
That's amazing. And because it's on a blockchain, you can't tamper with it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it on its own blockchain?
Yeah. So for GrassLand, I had to create a new type of blockchain for this. So you know how like with obviously every other regular blockchains, you have, of course, a set of addresses.
Yes.
Of course, that correspond to a wallet. So GrassLand has that. But I also made for a new type of address system, another type of binary address system, which corresponds to a particular point in space and time. And so, not to get into too much detail, but it's a fractal. And so what that means is you can get as if you extend this binary address, like, because with like Bitcoin, it'd be like 256 bits.
Yes.
SHA-256.
Right.
Or newer other types of encryption algorithms. You're using like 512 bits. That gives you a lot of address space. That gives you enough to encode every object event within the solar system. Right. Well over for the next 400 years.
Wow.
And so what that allows you to do is you can keep extending this address space where you can get it can be as sort of as granular as you want it to be and as wide as you want it to be. So with GrassLand, I was with the address space calculated out, you've got enough there to encode every object event for 7.5 billion kilometers in radius. So that's up to the Kuiper asteroid belt at the edge of the solar system. And the block reward that we set for it is over the next 400 years.
That's incredible. Wow. So this basically will be able to predict situations into 400 years in advance into the future.
Well, no, not predicting 400 years into the future, but it's just that the address space that you have,
it has that availability.
Yeah, you can just keep generating more and more addresses
So,
over at least for the next 400 years.
Wow, that's impressive. That's very, very cool. Now, with GrassLand, what are you up to right now?
So we're going to be releasing version 1.0 within the next few months. So what we're doing is we've got a digital twin of almost all the buildings on the planet now, and that's going to be going in the Genesis block. All right, so that'll be preloaded there. And so what we have now is we've got our sort of proof of work. So another thing that's very important, for GrassLand, we had to make a new type of proof of work. So essentially what it is that every time a frame from the video frame gets passed through this AI, right, we take a hash. And this hash sort of basically, let's say, it's like I don't want to use the wrong word here, but I want to make it easy to understand. It's like a snapshot at that particular point in time of what the computations that were going on within the AI to do these detections. And so what that does is that gives us a tamper-resistant, this is where we get this tamper-resistant version of history, right? And we can also prove that all the nodes in the network were doing work. We're doing proof of work. Yes. Essentially, what we're doing is, of course, we're transforming the world into a giant blockchain.
Right.
But each node in the network, each client, they form this decentralized autonomous intelligence that incentivizes its expansion across the world by paying each miner to reveal all the dark parts on its map of the globe.
Right. Okay. So for, let's say, for somebody who knows nothing about blockchain, nothing about AI, and somebody who's just, hey, what's GrassLand?
So GrassLand.
What am I going to do with it?
You're going to be able to, so for instance, when two cars collide, if two cars collide in GrassLand,
yes.
Imagine you have a contract, an automatic contract made by an insurance company.
Okay.
And that contract is automatically triggered by two cars colliding, right?
Right.
Which pays out, right, or does whatever this contract needs to do for the insurance. It's going to take place, right? Or imagine we can track diseases. So anytime anybody contracts a disease, we can trace back and see exactly where this disease originated from.
Okay.
And find all the people, right, that might have been infected.
Okay.
And so what this does is it enables us to, of course, for epidemiology, for disease control, for all these things, be able to control diseases, right, for the first time in history. The other thing is, one thing we were working on a few years ago for the forest fires in Australia. GrassLand, what it does, of course, you can since it can track people and it has these models of buildings.
Yes.
Then imagine in the future, very short time in the future, where if you're a firefighter, policeman, emergency services worker, whatever, the moment you arrive on the scene, you know exactly how many people are in each building, right?
So it's like a whole consciousness which kind of knows where everything is. If you tap into it, you can use the information for the purpose, for example, like a fireman for safety hazards.
Exactly.
Wow.
And especially if you think about, they're making decisions on the fly. They have limited resources. How many people are in this building? If there's no one in there, that'll be a waste of time, right? Yes. We can get these people out. We know exactly their circumstances. I can say there's 2 children in this building, right? There's 5 people, adults in this building. Imagine how many lives that could save, right?
That is definitely, wow, that's something for sure. Now, something really just on the side, I guess, would be, how did you come up with the name GrassLand for such type of robotic AI type of tech? Yeah,
it's a bit nerdy. Well,
ironic.
Nerdy,
nerdy, ironically.
That's saying a lot, I guess. With GrassLand, once I looked at the mathematics and I looked at the game theory and saw what it was telling us, I realized that, okay, well, what this does is sort of makes it so that this data that would normally be so you have these big companies, these big tech companies, they collect data and it's proprietary to them, right? They have this sort of incentive where their value proposition is to maintain control of that data. But GrassLand flips that on its head, right? Because the data, it's essentially the proof of work. Right. So, as I mentioned, that hash, what that data is, of course, is the original version of that hash, right? And so when they're sharing this information, each of the nodes in the network, they're doing it Because just in the same way, if you queried a Bitcoin node and you said, what is the next hash, or give me the last few transactions, or it'll give it to you, right? Because it's incentivized to do so. In the same way with GrassLand nodes, right? They're incentivized to do so because that's how you build up this complete awareness.
Yes.
And that's how the system, pays each of the nodes for their computation.
Right.
So that sort of flips that whole model on its head, where you're giving away this information for free, which any other company, a human being, would have to keep to themselves because of the way, that human beings operate in their economy. But this AI would have a completely different economy in that sense, where we'd be giving away its information and sharing it because it gives it, it increases its awareness because it's all distributed. Yeah. And so then I realized that, if you take this to the analogy, is that about 65 million years ago, there was this new, just after the dinosaurs died, this new plant appeared on the planet. And of course, obviously, we know it's grass, right? I'm leading into. And grass it's a weird plant because it literally is on every continent of the globe, and it spread very quickly. But the thing, and you'd think that, okay, well, you have this very somewhat low-lying shrub, low-lying plant, and it's competing against all of these, giant trees and ferns and all of these other incumbents. And of course, they're competing for the light. Yes. But grass is very low-lying, so you'd think it would be blocked and it would struggle. But the thing that grass does, or it evolved these two very interesting features, is that one, it's very flammable. Right? You can actually some strains of grass, you can, if you cut them and you leave them for a while out in the sun, then they break down. The chemicals that get released, just a little bit of heat will cause them to spontaneously combust. Wow. The other thing is that it's very resilient, or I'd say perhaps anti-fragile to fire, in that if you burn grass, right, it'll actually spring up again and it'll come back stronger, right? And it springs up within a few days after a forest fire. And so the thing is, all grass needs to do is get into an area, right? Just a little seedling. And it's only a matter of time before a forest fire will start. Okay. And when that happens, of course, all these big trees, right? These big carbon silos burn down. They're all out of the way. They're all out of the way. And grass just springs up. Yes. Right? And so I would see it as, well, if I looked at the model, the math is saying was that you'd have these big data silos, right? Of like these trees, right? Yeah, okay. And so right, just essentially burning their value proposition to the ground. And you'd have a system where, because it's decentralized, like where do you go to stop grass, right? Grass is just this plant. There's no like central place that controlling grass,
keep
right?
Cutting it, it keeps coming back.
It's everywhere, right? So you can't really do that. And with an AI that is not only perceiving you, but also making predictions about what you're going to do. Yes. And so when you sort of attack grassland, like with like attacks, like if you're trying to obscure a particular area, the AI remembers that. Right. And it knows how much computation that you have. So it knows how much resources that you're spending, that you have to spend to obscure some area. Okay. And of course it remembers which areas you're trying to make dark. Yes. So it'll just raise the value, the block reward for that particular area. Right. So so that would, raising that block reward would actually incentivize the miners to come in and get that reward, right? Because you're trying to make it so that it can't predict things. Yes. And now, when all you're doing is giving it that type of giving it more information about, or giving it a complete awareness about what are the sort of the dangers in its environment, and what are the things that are trying to oppose it. Yes. And so and just like grass, where you have this sort of anti-fragile nature. Yeah. That is very cool. That is I love that. I love that story, how you came up with that. Now, what does the future look like for GrassLand and for yourself? So for GrassLand, we just have to, like what we want to be is just a very good sort of API very low level, very simple, right? So that people can build things on top of it.
Okay.
Because, that's the main thing. We're not trying to be, a self-driving car company. We're not trying to be, epidemiologists or anything like that, or drone deliveries. We just want to create a model of the real world, make sure, debug the software, make sure it's very, good, maintain it.
What kind of... Sorry to interrupt. I just have this question since you sprung it up. What kind of projects do you see being built on this platform?
Well, besides self-driving cars and those types of things, you can have like drone deliveries or the other thing that I find is among all the things that we find interesting is just robotics, essentially.
Okay.
Right. So being able to do analysis in that sense, where you have complete awareness of your environment. So for instance, for logistics, shipping, right? Having this digital twin of a shipping yard, having this digital twin of a factory, right? And a lot of these factories, most of the buildings in the world are already in our Genesis block, right? The other thing I find is really, really interesting is analytics.
Yes.
So with, how there's analytics for websites like Mixpanel, and of course everyone knows Google Analytics and these different types of analytics. It's sort of look at how humans interact with the website, right? In order to optimize user engagement.
Yeah.
But imagine doing that for the real world, because you can take GrassLand data, pull this into an analytics application, and being able to see how humans interact with the real world. What are the cues in the world that get us to do anything?
Wow.
Right. And you'd have that. It's hard to say what that's going to look like or what that's going to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just thinking about like the medical things that you could help with that type of technology and ideas and work with that. It's definitely something.
Yeah. And so, it's just our goal is just to make it so that base layer, is always there. It's always stable. And, just debugging things and making sure that's there so that, that digital twin of the world, because that's all you need to build and then make it so that it becomes extremely easy. Mm-hmm. It's easier and easier to build things on top of that. Right. Because that ecosystem feeds back into GrassLand, right? Because the more use cases there are, the more the network spreads.
Yes.
The more the network spreads, the more use cases there are. It's just this feedback loop.
Is there a token?
Yeah.
Okay.
There is. So
let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So only 21 million will be.
21 million is a good number, right?
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't try not to change too many things.
Yes.
Only 21 million will be produced over time. Over the next 400 years. The thing about GrassLand, of course, is you have a lot of miners. You don't just have a single miner that actually gets that reward at the end of the day. You have, as many nodes as there are processing video streams.
Right.
And so what happens is every 10 minutes, the AI, what it does is it gives, essentially pays out this block reward. It's split up amongst all the miners. So if there's 10 miners, it's split up amongst, they get into the block, it's split up amongst 10. If there's 100, it's split amongst 100, on and on and on, of course. Mm-hmm. Right. And so what that does, of course, is what they're being paid for essentially is, of course, that computation that's being done. But the most important thing, they're not paid evenly. They're paid according to how well their individual observations help other nodes in the network predict what they're going to see.
I see. So if there's like a corner where nothing's going on, it's going to be a very minimal.
Yeah.
There's the lower rate.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because what you're doing is the point is to reduce uncertainty for the rest of the network.
Right.
And so the way that if there's not a lot that's going on there, then there's not a lot of uncertainty about what's going on. Right. But if it's a very high traffic area, there's a lot going on, right? Each node, right, the whole point of it is, if you think about them, they're part of this network that's trying to make predictions, that's trying to anticipate the future as far as they can. And so if you one node is being able to say, okay, this is what you're going to see. This is what's coming, right? There's a car coming your way, right? Then that is actually, there's value in that.
Right.
Because
so it's sort of like a super updated Google Maps type.
Sort of like that, yeah.
Type with, but
if Google
video Maps, way better, AI.
Well, there's no video. The video is on the video we're extracting it and producing this digital twin. But if Google Maps knew exactly the coordinates for your head, your skull, your body, your torso, your legs, and of course everything was live and the coordinates for every car, and gave you this model of it for free.
Yeah, that's wild. That's amazing. Now, before we kind of wrap things up in here, with your token, do you know any of the specifics with the tokenomics as of yet, or is that still being worked on?
We're still working that out.
What will be the token? Do you know the token name yet?
It's GLC, just GrassLand coin, just
Makes
simple.
Yeah.
So and it's a native coin to that blockchain, right? Yes. So you can use, of course, you can query GrassLand from any other, any other blockchain, of course, for smart contracts. The other most important thing that we're going to be doing, and this will be coming out later next year, will be a region bounty. So what this is, it allows, normally it's just the AI that, of course, determines what the price is for each node, right? It does this, each part of the map of the globe, right? And it's doing this, it's changing this at every block, just according to how things change. But what will be coming is region bounties, where any user can use their wallet, their digital wallet, and basically draw on the map using the UI a perimeter around any area of the map and set a bounty on that, which will pay a bonus to any miner that captures, a digital twin of the people, things, and places, and the place in that area. Okay, that's going to be a game changer. So the most important thing for us is making sure that governments and people working in defense are aware that this technology is out there, and making sure that they can continue to do their job effectively. And so because you can't really put the genie back in the bottle now
once it's out.
So I was asked to solve this problem, and so I did. But then, of course, as you're writing, once you write one line of code and you write another, it's like what Bilbo says, right? You got to be careful when you step out of your door of your house, right? Because you never know where you're going to be. It's going to lead you to, where you'll be swept off to. Same thing with writing code. I didn't expect to have to do that. I never thought how far this would go or what the implications were. But now that we're here, realize that we have to make sure that that the world is ready to catch up to this technology.
Yeah, definitely. Within the next 5 years, where do you see this technology going? Realistically, at the pace that the world is moving, at the pace that you're going, at the pace that AI is moving?
Oh, I have no idea. Because I wouldn't have expected that AI, I knew, we knew, we could see from the beginning it was good, in terms of just talking about things like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, but I never thought it would be winning art competitions this early, right? The thing is, you don't know. That's the problem. There's a branch of mathematics called basically complexity theory. You've probably heard a branch of it in the movie Jurassic Park. Chaos theory.
Okay.
Where it's essentially the thing is that there's certain things that are unpredictable, because they are sensitive to initial conditions that are too small to measure. Okay. Just like it's a butterfly effect, right? A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and you get rain in Manhattan or something, right?
Yeah.
Where you get this knock-on effect, so this sort of exponential changes. And GrassLand is a complex system, right? by that mathematical definition.
Right.
So it's really hard for me. I can't predict.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody can. Just the implications, which we're finding new things all the time, new use cases from people,
of course,
and things that we never would have predicted.
Yeah.
So I think that's the exciting thing, that what we can predict is unpredictability.
Yes. That's good in a way, right?
And I think if we could predict it, then it wouldn't be anywhere near as interesting.
Yes, definitely. Now, before we let you go, I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
For the explanation, for your contribution to blockchain, to the tech world, to AI, and just being a very, very cool individual and allowing me to have this conversation with you. It's very exciting to kind of take a peek at what the future might hold for me and for everybody else as well, right? So definitely. Now, before we let you go, guys, we are sponsored by Meta Marketing International, and we hope you come back because we have a lot more content and very interesting people like David over here. We will link all of David's links in the description. If somebody wants to link up with you, they definitely can. You will leave all the information there as well. And thank you for your time. And
thank you.
Awesome.